Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Writers Podcast. I'm here today with Raúl Herrera, and Raúl is a decorated Vietnam War veteran who has had plenty of interesting tales to tell, and he finally got around to writing a book about it. So we're very interested to hear everything that Raúl has to tell us. And Raúl, welcome to the podcast.
Lou, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the Swift boat story.
Awesome, not a problem. And you're down there trying to keep cool in Houston, Texas, and
Uh,
we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, I'm not going to make you sweat too much during this interview. All right, so Raul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? This is the part of the podcast I kind of call "This Is Your Life." So let the listeners know what it is about you that they should find interesting.
it's an interesting life. I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas.
Mm,
I'm a 46 model, so that puts me at around 76 or so. So you can do the math.
okay.
But
Wow,
I lived
looking pretty
in a
spry.
yeah. Thank you. I lived in a section of San Antonio that everyone referred to as the barrio, and that
Okay.
was the poor section of town. And there were many pockets, many poverty pockets in the San Antonio area, and I was in one of them. And I was born and raised in a Catholic household, so mom insisted that we get our Catholic education. Spent 12 years of elementary school at Sacred Heart, and then from there I went to high school at Holy Cross High School in the
Mm,
far west side of San Antonio.
okay. And from there, high school. What happened once you got to high school?
Well,
What
that's where my
time period are we talking about too? I think that's
well,
important.
yes, absolutely. I grew up in the 50s and
Hmm.
60s. Great
Right.
music, great music during
I
that
totally
period.
agree. I'm 65, so I'm not that much younger
Well,
than you.
you're
So
catching up. You're
I am. But yeah, the 60s and 70s were a great era of music for sure.
well, we had. I consider myself fortunate because in our part of the country, in the Mexican American community, we had the pleasure of having homegrown garage bands that eventually grew up into something that the kids would really enjoy. And I'd spend my weekends going to these venues that they'd have at different locations in San
Hmm.
Antonio. And the environment was great. It's great. It's terrific. We had the opportunity to meet a lot of kids. They had car clubs back then in the 50s and 60s,
Hmm.
like the piston knockers, the gear grinders, the road griffins. And the funny thing is that coming out of the venues or going in, we never saw any hot rods. So it was a unique time, though. The music was
Right.
wonderful, wonderful. We had a great time during those periods. And of course,
Okay.
I grew up playing football in high school.
Hmm.
Kind of short for my high school days, but yet I was able to manage to become a quarterback at Holy Cross,
Wow.
and that was a fun time.
Mm. Very good. So you get out of high school and the world's your oyster, but what do you decide to do?
Well, high school ended, and I said, "What am I going to do now?"
Hmm.
Parents mm, couldn't afford to send me to college, unfortunately, and I wound up visiting the different service branches at the post office right down the street from the Alamo in San Antonio, and
Mm.
I was looking to continue my career, if you would, in drafting because in high
Mm.
school I happened to win a architectural drafting contest of a lakeside resort, elevation plan, watercolored, and uh, floor plan, and I took first place.
Mm.
So I thought I wanted to be an architect at that
Right.
time. And the Navy had the best thing going as far as that career field was concerned.
Mm. Interesting.
They offered me Class A drafting school. As a matter of fact,
Mm.
no, they went beyond offering it. They promised me
Hmm.
Class A drafting school, and I took it hook, line, and sinker. And off I went to join the Navy. And
Mm,
this was in September of '65 when I went to boot camp in San Diego.
mm,
And unfortunately, when we got into boot camp, one of the first things that they do in processing these slug recruits is they push you through what's called classification.
mm,
And during classification, they run you through a battery of different exams to see what field you'd best fit in for the service in the Navy.
right.
When the sessions ended, they threw us into a big auditorium and they proceeded to tell us which schools were no longer available. And
Mm,
guess what?
drafting was
Draftsman
gone.
Class A school was no longer available. Yeah,
Yeah.
I raised my hand because, gosh, they promised me drafting school.
Right.
And and so everyone started laughing around me, and I didn't think it was a bit funny, after giving myself 4 years away to drafting school, and they just negated on it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
coming out of the classification auditorium, the upperclassmen recruits, they had a jingle. By the way, they used to call the incoming recruits mothballs because our uniforms reeked of storage mothballs.
Right.
And so we came out of the classification all disappointed, disgusted, angry, for lack of other flavorful words. And the
Mm-hmm.
recruits came in and they just burst into a jingle that went, mothball, mothball, don't feel blue. Our recruiters screwed us too. So yeah, that was it. That was it. I was out of school, and but fortunately, my parents sent me the actual poster of the
Mm-hmm.
award-winning poster for the Lakeside Resort and 3 letters of recommendation.
Mm,
Suddenly, Draftsman Class A school was miraculously open.
mm,
So they offered me the school. However, they threw a twist into it and they said, well, listen, we need a draftsman here at the Public Works Department on base here in San Diego. What about getting on the job training, OJT, on the job training for 2 years? I said, two
mm,
years in sunny California? And that only leaves me with 2 years left of my 4 year commitment. I said, I'll
mm-hmm.
take it. I have one word of advice: never pass up an education.
Right.
Because I did that, I wound up receiving orders to swift boats, combat boat training in Coronado across the bay from San Diego.
Mm,
So
okay. And what's a swift boat?
a swift boat is a patrol boat that is designed to patrol the waters closest to shore. What
Mm,
happened, if I may share the story? A Army helicopter pilot on way to take a patient to a field hospital along the coast was going over this peninsula that paralleled the beach, an odd peninsula. It created a cove, created a bay. This bay was called Vungro Bay, and they spotted what appeared to be a floating island.
mm,
So they went down to investigate, and gosh, this floating island turned out to be an enemy trawler. They started receiving fire from behind the palm trees and bushes that they had stacked all over the decks of the trawler, trying to camouflage themselves.
mm,
And that led to the beginning and the creation of Operation Market Time, the Navy's Operation Market Time Task Force 115. And the mission of Operation Market Time was to patrol the 1,200 miles of coastline from the DMZ up north,
mm-hmm.
south, 1,200 miles of coastline all the way down and around the peninsula at the
Mm,
southern tip of Vietnam, the Mekong Delta, basically.
right.
And that was our mission. And we had bases all along the coast in different locations, like Da Nang and Chu Lai and Vung Tau and uh, Antoy. We were all over that
Mm,
area, and we were the last line of defense, if you will, preventing our mission. Our mission primarily was set up to prevent the infiltration of enemy ships from North Vietnam. That, by the way, up until that trawler was detected and captured, the North Vietnamese had been very successful. unbeknownst to the Navy, intelligence, and everyone else, had been successful in delivering hundreds of tons, thousands of tons of ammunition and supplies to the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army regulars operating in South Vietnam.
Mm.
And so they discovered that, wow, we need to put a blockade, we need to put a stop to it. And that's why they created that. Now, Operation Market Time and the task force, it involved aerial surveillance aircraft that
Mm-hmm.
flew the coastline, detecting steel hull trawlers. The next line of defense were the deep water vessels like the destroyers, the minesweepers, and things along that line. The Coast Guard WEX, they called them, bigger ships.
Mm-hmm.
The next line of defense further into shore were 82-foot Coast Guard cutters called
Mm.
WPBs. And again, then along the beach, from the beach to 3 miles out, it was the responsibility of the swift boats to protect the shoreline. And in addition, we also were required to inspect fishing junks all
Okay.
along the coast, because the Viet Cong used that to hide the transportation of arms and individual troops from one point to another all along the coast.
Mm.
Oftentimes, swift boat crews would discover hidden compartments or weapons inside rice barrels along
Mm-hmm.
those lines. Or also, and there was one occasion when we had a Vietnamese Navy liaison officer with us on patrol, and he would interrogate the fishermen, asking them for identification, etc. The ones that didn't have identification, well, they were immediately suspected of being enemy soldiers or draft dodgers.
Okay.
And so, at one occasion, we picked up, I think, it must have been on 5 to 8 individuals uh, later on, and I was assigned to guard them.
Mm.
We had them secured to the stanchions along the back, the fantail of the swift boat. And so then we took them to base, and they later told us that 3 of those individuals were confirmed Viet Cong.
Mm.
So that took me back a little bit, because it's just like you and I here talking.
Right.
I don't know that you're the enemy, but in Vietnam, the Viet Cong was one and the same with a fisherman out doing
Right.
labor for supporting their families. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing different is that, hey, you take the weapon away from the individual, and there goes the enemy. But
Right.
just the same, that was our mission. And if
Mm-hmm.
you'd like the swift boats, in short, in brief, the swift boats were 50 foot long.
Right. Would they be something like that? Would I've seen this in like an Apocalypse Now or something like that?
No,
Were any of those
no,
boats?
that was a sister vessel. That
Okay.
was Task Force 116,
Okay.
the game warden unit. They patrol mostly the rivers, and those
Mm-hmm.
out of Apocalypse Now, that was a PBR, Patrol Boat River.
Okay.
Their propulsion system was jacuzzi-driven engines. Yes,
Wow.
and so no propellers, just jacuzzi-driven, and they were fast, but they
Mm-hmm.
were smaller than
Mm.
our craft. Ours was 50 foot long, made of sturdy aluminum,
Mm.
and we had a pilot house. Well, these vessels, the U.S. Navy found them operating in the Gulf Coast, out of Louisiana. A company called Berwick Seacraft out of, no, I'm sorry, Stewart Seacraft out of Berwick, Louisiana, manufactured these craft, and they would haul men and equipment to the um, oil rigs out in the Gulf. And
Mm.
so these were perfect little craft. They needed maybe 3, 4 feet of water, not less, often.
Mm.
And so that was perfect. And so what they did is they secured an order with them for ultimately building 104 Mark I swift boats
Mm.
for duty in Vietnam. And they had added, they already had the pilot house up front. So they added a cabin behind the pilot house, and on top of the pilot house, off to the back of it, was a gun tub. that held the twin 50 caliber machine guns. And on the fantail, we had a mortar, an 81 millimeter mortar,
Mm-hmm.
with a piggyback mounted 50 caliber machine gun as well. And the mortar was unique because it, you've seen movies of the field troops dropping a mortar round into the tube, and it
Mm-hmm.
fires off automatically, right? Well,
Right.
our mortar had the option to put it into trigger fire mode, and that
Mm.
came very helpful in
Okay.
our
So yeah,
battles.
I'm looking at a picture of one now. Did you have two guns? There looks like there's one at the front and one at the back. Is that the kind of boat
Well,
that
the
you were?
guns in the front, that's the gun tub over the pilot house.
Yeah.
Yes, over the pilot house, that was the gun tub, and it had the twin 50 caliber machine guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
And
what was
and
at the back?
and the back was the mortar with a piggyback single 50 caliber machine gun mounted piggyback style on top
Right.
of the mortar.
And,
Yeah.
and is the picture from your website, is that you with at the back then?
I don't know which one you're looking at, but it
It's
could
from your
be.
webpage. It's on your home or about the author. It shows you sleeveless, and I can see the gun, and it looks like there's a round circular sight. It looks like you're at the back of the boat. It's hard to tell because there's water
It
behind you,
it
so I'm
it,
assuming.
it probably no. I tell you what, am I not in the gun tub? Maybe.
I don't think so. I don't see anything around you. You just look like you're kind of sitting in the open to me, but
Okay.
maybe
All
it's hard to tell because it's an
right.
angled down picture. Yeah. But I'm curious. As a high school graduate, when you wanted to become a drafter, did you ever see yourself end up serving in Vietnam? Like, were you aware of the war in Vietnam at the time you enlisted, or?
Lou, when I got orders to combat boat, no, I got orders to PCF Crew Training.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck is PCF Crew Training? Well, the higher ranking enlisted men eventually, they didn't know what it was either,
Mm,
but they found out, and the highest enlisted men in our area, a chief, by his rate is called a chief,
mm-hmm.
he just came over to me and said, put his hand on my shoulder and said, son, you're going to Vietnam.
Oh,
These are
jeez.
these are combat boats.
Uh-huh.
And I just froze. I said, combat? I didn't sign up for combat, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the war was picking up at that time in
Right.
66 going into 67.
Mm,
Gosh, I didn't even know. I didn't even know where Vietnam was. And
right.
in the 60s, you're in sunny California. You're enjoying all the music, and
Yeah.
uh, you don't pay attention. You don't,
Mm-hmm.
at least you hear it, but maybe you don't really concentrate. Oh, that's over there. The war is over there. I'm over here having fun.
Right.
So it was a
Right.
shocker to me. It was really a shocker to me.
I bet. So I'm curious then, because you obviously you had a 1 year tour, and then you were done.
In Vietnam, yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah.
So then you came back to the mainland, I guess you could say, and from there it looks like you became a freelance writer for various magazines.
Yes.
Curious how that
What
started.
happened? Of course, we I came back, and I wound up with another year of duty to finish my 4 years in Groton, Connecticut, at the submarine base. So after I finished that,
Okay.
then I came home to San Antonio. I returned home to San Antonio and
Hmm.
went into the engineering field.
Right.
Yes, and so I started in a survey crew, and eventually wound up going into the drafting, and I continued in that area that I really enjoyed and liked, and uh,
Good.
that's where I went. Yeah.
Okay. So where did this freelance writing stuff come from?
Well, it stemmed from the fact that in reading the material, perhaps you've seen that Skunk Alpha.
Mm-hmm.
Skunk Alpha was a code name of a North Vietnamese resupply trawler that
Mm.
we captured on July the 15th of 1967. It was carrying more than 90 tons of ammunition and supplies for the enemy in
Wow.
the area where we were patrolling. And so that's basically, and Skunk Alpha is a code name for this
Mm.
particular vessel that was given. And It's an interesting story where four surface units were established as an intercept task group, and our swift boat PCF 79
Mm-hmm.
was the last line of defense, and we knew the area quite well. The trawler was headed towards what's called the Batangan Peninsula, and there's a
Mm.
river in the middle of that peninsula called the Saki River, and that was its ultimate destination. Mm,
Right.
The trawler was intercepted by aircraft, and when it was discovered, and they lowered the craft's surface area, taking pictures, the trawler went back out to sea and went about 300 miles east, away from the coast of Vietnam to the Paracel Islands, and ultimately they decided to come back, and a destroyer, the Wilhoit, a gunboat, the Gallup, Coast Guard cutter, the Point Orient, and our boat were put to the task of bringing this enemy ship down. And
Mm.
we were given, our particular vessel was given orders to bring it down. And we eventually were decorated by Premier Nguyen Cao Ki and the Chief of State Nguyen Van Thieu in a great, glorious award ceremony in Da Nang.
Mm.
We were pinned and congratulated personally by the heads of state, and that was a great honor. But
I
coming
guess. I
back,
guess.
coming back to the story about how did I get started,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what happened was that the boatswain Bobby Don Carver, he was our lead petty officer, second in command to Lieutenant J.G. Edward Bergen. He's the one who fired a mortar round into the pilot house of the pilot house of the trawler,
Mm-hmm.
forcing it to run aground, and then that's why we wound up capturing the 90 tons of ammunition.
Right.
Uh, Months later, on December the 6th of '67, he was killed in action. We
Mm.
were running a psychological warfare mission along the coast in an area well known as My Lai, and we were ambushed by three positions on the beach. Long story short, when I came home, I had a traumatic event the day after, the night after we encountered that enemy, and he lost his life.
Mm.
I got over that incident, but came home and I thought that I was doing well. But eventually, I began having haunting episodes
Mm.
based on his death, and I felt him around me. I couldn't take showers. I'd close my eyes and I'd see him just as I'm looking at your face right now. And
Right.
there were haunting events. And
Mm-hmm.
on a trip to Greece in the island of Limnos, I was sitting on the beach with my young baby son, and a fishing boat passed by,
Mm-hmm.
ragged sails, and from the local village. It's a small island,
Mm-hmm.
and it flashed me back to Vietnam, and again the haunting things that he was hitting me with. And I said, boats. That was his nickname, boats.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? What are you trying to tell me? Why are you bothering me with all these haunting episodes? And it dawned on me. I had an epiphany. It says, well, maybe he wants me to tell our story, to
Mm.
tell his story. Had he not fired that round into the pilot house, that the ship might have gone up the river and evaded and become successful in unloading their weaponry.
Right.
So I did that, and of course, gosh, English wasn't my best subject in high school,
Mm.
but I was committed to it. I promised him in his memory that I would do my best at doing this. Came
Right.
home, and eventually, over time, I started dabbling in what it would take to write a book, and people would tell me, "Listen, you need to join a writing community."
Mm-hmm.
I joined what at that time in Houston was the Manuscripters Guild. I went to conferences. I was also told, "Listen, you need to consider improving your writing by writing articles." And so I started writing articles. I had
Okay.
articles in the Houston Post, and I've already written articles in Sea Classics magazine,
Mm.
Vietnam magazine, and even had an
Okay.
article in the New York Times.
Mm.
So that led me and it helped me along the way in writing this book and writing this story. It's taken 40
Cool.
years. It's
Mm.
taken more than 40 years to get this done for many, many reasons why the delay
Mm-hmm.
has been long, but promise made, promise kept. The book is finally published.
Awesome. Yeah, I was I was afraid to broach the subject with you because, you know, it's obviously the subject of so many dramas and movies, and that about PTSD or uh,
PTSD.
yeah, that sounds like that's what you were experiencing. Would you say that was correct?
Yes, I was in denial for many, many years
Mm-hmm.
until one good swift boat veteran friend of mine approached me at my house, and at that time I was the president of the Swift Boat Sailors Association, a
Mm-hmm.
national organization, and he said, "Well, before I come in and visit with you, I want you to take that president's hat off because I want to talk to Raul." And by the way, my nickname given to me by our fallen comrade, uh, my moniker is Bean. And so he told me, he said, "Bean, you take that president's hats off. I want to talk to him directly. I want to talk to Raul." And it was an interesting visit, and he convinced me that I needed to help.
Mm,
So
interesting.
I
Got a
went
lot of
in.
questions there. So why did they call you Bean?
Well, I
Or is that
guess.
too
It,
personal?
well, no, 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 no. Don't shy away from it. Don't get the culture
Yeah, is it
clash
Mexican
on me
jumping
here.
bean? I don't want to.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Hispanic,
yeah,
Hispanic.
yeah.
It turns out that in the Navy at that time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, all Hispanics, whether they're Puerto Rican or from Venezuela or wherever,
Right.
in the Navy, they were called Bean. It wasn't intended to be derogatory
Derogatory.
or anything.
Right.
And of course, it shocked me when he told me that. The first time I went up to him and I met him, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I extended my hand to shake hands with him when we began in training in Coronado.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me up and down, and he had a handlebar mustache like this, and
Oh,
tattoos
geez.
all over the place. And
Right.
he looked down on me. He says, "What's going on, Bean?" And that's it. And I've been Bean ever since. As a matter of fact, I was
Okay.
Bean before Mr. Bean became popular.
Yeah, because that was another question I was going to ask you, being, you know, of Mexican descent in the 60s, serving in the army. Um, were you was there any racial tensions between you and the rest of the corps, or how did
No,
that work out?
In the Navy, I no, it was just kidding around stuff.
Right.
It's just what they refer to as grab assing. That
Sure.
was common in all
Yeah.
services: Army, Marines, Air Force,
Right.
Navy. That's common, and so you just
Mm-hmm.
took it. At first, it offended me, in a way, but I wasn't about to challenge him. I just gave him a real dirty disdain look at him because he was way bigger than I was, and of course,
Right.
higher rank, higher rate that I was. So I had to
Right.
respect the order, the pecking order to some degree. But yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So you were a freelance writer. You wrote some stuff for Vietnam Magazine and Viva. You've got in the New York Times, which is
Yes.
fantastic. And then you finally got your book out in was it 2017? Is that
No,
right?
no.
Uh,
June 27th of this year, just a
oh,
few
of this
months,
year.
couple of
Okay.
months ago. Couple of
Ah,
months ago. Yes, sir.
okay. And I see that you've mentioned on your website that this book, this Skunk Alpha incident, is mentioned in 4 books. Are these also nonfiction books, or are these fiction,
Yes,
or is it
yes. Fellow swift boat veterans wrote their own books, and
okay?
and, and they also dedicated a chapter to the incident of the capture of Skunk
Okay.
Alpha. Uh,
Okay. Very cool. Now, so you've kept your promise to your teammate, and now you've got this book out. Are you planning to continue writing books, or do you feel it's mission accomplished now?
Mission accomplished.
Okay.
40 years of effort and
Uh,
storage boxes filled with research material, too much research
right.
involved. And it was a promise I made, and I kept it, and I'm happy with that. Now, of course, I've got to continue. Now that the book is published, you've got to
Hmm.
continue promoting it until
Right.
I guess maybe
Right.
a year and a half of a continuing effort in trying to get the word out. That was my goal. That was my mission all
Hmm.
along, along with the promise to write the story in his memory. It's also in
Right.
the memory of 50 swiftboat sailors that lost their lives during the Vietnam War. and
Mm,
I made it my goal to have our legacy, our swift boat legacy,
mm,
told, because not very much is written about the Navy's involvement in Vietnam,
right.
much less the small combatants, such as
Mm,
the PBRs and the Coast Guard cutters and the Operation Market Time and the swift boats. I wanted to make sure that our story, the swift boat story, went far and beyond uh, the coast to coast in the United States and elsewhere. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, I know I saw when the book came out, I noticed that there was a bookseller in Japan that was selling it. It was selling the
mm,
book, and
wow.
also in the UK, they also
Mm,
had it in a bookseller there in the UK. They had it, so
mm,
I'm very pleased with that. It's been coming along
right.
quite well.
Right. It's considering the number of books that's been written about this, and maybe it's been done and I just not aware, but the Skunk Alpha incident sounds like it would make a good movie or show or something. But
Fingers
fingers
crossed.
crossed.
Fingers
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 crossed.
crossed.
Yeah.
It takes just one individual to catch wind of this story because it is a very worthwhile story, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a historical value because again,
Mm-hmm.
the story goes. The United States lost the war in Vietnam. That's what you hear all the time. We lost the war. We lost the war. Well, the
Right.
Navy won its share of battles. And
Right.
so I'm trying to promote that so that John Q. public will
Mm-hmm.
finally understand that, wow, we did. It's book's not, it involves me, but the book is not about me. It's about us. It's our story. And that's what I'm
Right.
trying to promote. I'm trying to pass the word along and for our future generations to know that there was an aspect of the Vietnam War that hardly isn't talked about. And I want to change that through my
Okay.
book, Capturing Skunk Alpha.
Very cool. Now the book, how's it structured? Does it just basically follow your crew's journey chronologically, or like how did you does
Yes.
each character
uh,
get like a point of view kind of thing, or
Well, interesting you asked that. Thank you for asking that question because, uh, I consider it nonfiction. And they also have
right,
another aspect to nonfiction. They call it creative nonfiction.
right,
Uh, and nonfiction is it's a dry read typically. I mean, your
right,
history books, your newspaper. Well,
right,
I wanted my characters to come alive. I wanted the reader to experience what we felt uh,
right,
during this period. Uh, what I went through emotionally when my
sure,
boatsman was killed. And you can't get that by just describing it in words. You have to use it in dialogue.
right,
And so I use what's referred to as literary license, if it exists. And I gave voice to my characters. And we had
right.
many characters. We had individuals like in our crew, we had Porky, we had Gunner, we had Lord Mort. He was our boat officer. The boat officers called him Lord Mort because King of Death.
Okay.
After the capture of the trawler, we strung up a
Hmm.
broom on the mast of the radar, indicating full sweep. And
Okay.
we had another guy,
Full sweep.
Hogjaws. We had Hogjaws. Um,
Uh,
so the characters are there. It's a very colorful crew, and
yeah, it
and
sounds
I
like it.
think it'd be worth a good story. It's a good
Right. How,
read.
how many men are in the crew?
There were six of us,
Six.
a boat
Okay.
officer, a young boat officer, Lieutenant J.G. Edward Bergen,
Mm-hmm.
the boatswain mate, Bobby Dunn Carver, he was first class, another first class engineman, Reinhardt, Ronald Reinhardt, he was nicknamed Porky. Then
Mm-hmm.
we had the gunner, Bob Middleton. He was a torpedo man, but he filled the slot for our gunner. And
Okay.
then myself, I was a radarman and
Hmm.
then the deckhand. So there were
Okay.
five crewmen.
Right. And are any of your crewmates still alive today? Have you kept in touch or?
There's only three of us left. Well,
Okay.
three original crewmates: my boat officer, Mr. Bergen, the gentleman that was an engineman as well, Schneider, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and myself, and Bob
Okay.
Middleton, the gunner.
And did they by any chance read your book?
They have, yes, yes.
And what did they say?
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of honesty involved in it. We
Right.
did things that you know we need to be honest. I certainly didn't bash anyone,
Mm-hmm.
but when you talk about the situation where one of your crewmates gets killed in action. I mean, it's devastating. You know,
Sure.
fingers get pointed and this that, but no, we were doing our job. That we were
Right.
sent out to do our mission, and
Mm-hmm.
our crewmate lost his life because he decided that he needed to carry out our mission, and he
Mm-hmm.
advised our boat officer of someone on the beach on the sand dunes, and so we went slower in the water, almost dead in the water, on our boat, and that's when they ambushed us. And so because
Mm.
he was, carrying out his orders, he eventually one person got wounded. It was and that was it. But that was
Mm.
enough to really destroy us for a while. It was bad.
Right. Right. So it must feel like a I don't know if weight is the right word, but maybe satisfaction as well for you have to completed this book. Like you said, it took you 40 years, so it must be
It's
a mix of
it it
interesting feelings.
Yes, sir, Lou. It's been a catharsis. That's
Catharsis.
the
Okay.
term. It's a
Mm-hmm.
catharsis. It's veterans keep their stories bottled up most of the time,
Right.
and it's amazing how things manifest themselves, and you don't even realize why.
Mm.
They have reactions that aren't necessarily in tune with what maybe the situation is going on in your life, but way
Right.
in the back, maybe that's what brings it on. So I'm glad that I found the treatment that I needed, and medication, and the book has really given me um, a balance here with
Mm.
my PTSD. And interesting, one quick story.
Sure.
Um, when I made the commitment to write the book, when I made the promise to Bobby Don Carver to write the book, when I actually started writing it on tablets, because
Mm-hmm.
there were no computers back then, it was all typewritten.
Right. Right.
When I started actually putting pen to paper,
Mm-hmm.
those episodes in the shower and all those haunting episodes stopped,
Mm.
and I haven't had them since.
Wow. Wow.
So
Fantastic. So you
it
found
is
your
a
own
catharsis.
cure. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is a catharsis, definitely.
Right. So, another personal question, perhaps if is that have your family read it? Your wife, your kids? And
Yes,
what did they
I
think?
gave them all a copy, a signed copy of
Right,
my book,
right,
for
uh,
putting up with me all these 40 years.
right. And do you think they look at you differently now because of the story that you told?
Some of them haven't shared, but some have.
Hmm.
Gosh, Dad, I didn't know that you went through something like that.
Right.
My son Michael, he's been helping me a great deal with doing my PR um,
Okay.
flyers, if you will, for social
Right.
media.
Hmm.
And I happen to have the actual recording, the tape recording of the actual gun battle when we
Wow.
captured this enemy ship.
Mm.
And that kind of set him back. Says, "Wow, Dad, I didn't know you had gone through something like this."
Hmm.
And if you go to my website, there's a
Hmm.
link to my YouTube channel,
Yep.
and there's a number of short clips. There's a long book trailer there, and then there's some short clips that my son helped create. And in one of them, he includes some audio from the actual gun battle of that trawler.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
of
Okay.
course,
So that's I'm glad that you've got your catharsis with the book. And the book is called Capturing Skunk Alpha, a Barrio Soldier's Journey in Vietnam. And it can be found on the usual outlets, Amazon
yes,
and
sir,
so forth.
that's correct.
And are you I guess you're doing the media tours right now. Are you doing public appearances in across the country or just in your local area or what?
Wherever I'm invited. As a matter of fact,
All
I've
right.
got one guest speaker invitation for a reunion for the USS Wilhoit in San Diego this coming October, so I'll be traveling there. But
Okay.
I've been doing just local invitations with Rotary clubs and VFWs, American Legion organizations. They've been having me as well, but I'm hoping that we'll have additional coverage. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Network wise. And that's what
Right.
I'm really hoping for, to spread the word, to help spread the word about swift boats.
Okay. One more question. This
Okay.
is my Columbo impersonation. I just thought of it because I saw that you've done also you've done an oral history of your your tour of duty and whatnot. And I don't know if you're aware, but audiobooks are very big nowadays. Is there any plans for your book to do an audio version?
There is a possibility of that. And, if
Right.
I'm not mistaken, I believe I do have the audio rights in my contract with Texas Tech University Press. They're the publishers
Hmm.
of the book.
Okay.
And but as you know, at my age, even a secretary or two won't help with all the activities that I'm I'm actually exhausted, but
Oh, okay.
it's fun
Wow.
being exhausted, but
Yeah.
there's a lot to do with that. So
Right.
I suspect that maybe the interest picks up even more. There'll be a demand almost, I'm hoping, to
Right.
do an audio. So
Right.
we'll look
Okay,
at that.
now I've lied because I'm going to ask you one more question.
That's
If you're
fine.
normally not, if you're
I'm
normally
enjoying
not
the
writing,
conversation, Lou.
yeah, that's great. You're not, if you're normally not writing or promoting a book, what do you like to do in your retirement? Like, what is your passion? I think sailing, maybe. Is there something else? Or
The two passions, traveling. My
okay,
wife and I want to set out and just go relax and put our feet in the water and go to
right,
different places and take
okay.
cruises. And that's one of the things. The others, I love to fish. I love
Oh,
the
okay,
water. I love the water
okay.
stuff. I've got a kayak sitting in my garage that saying, "Take me out in the water. Take me out in the water." But I can't, at my age, I can't go out there alone anymore. I've got to have somebody go with me to make sure that I'm safe.
Well, I'll have to tell you, sir, you look pretty spry to me.
Thank you, Lou.
Okay, so that's I'm not going to bother you anymore
No,
because
no,
I know
let's keep
you're
talking.
a
That's
busy
absolutely
guy,
fine.
but I just wanted to make sure that we covered everything that you wanted to mention. So is there anything that hasn't come up yet that you'd like to mention to the listeners?
Well, no, that's just my request to the listeners would be if you know a veteran out there that an uncle, a grandfather, a father that served in Vietnam in particular, let them
Hmm.
know about capturing skunk alpha
Okay.
and guide them to the many different websites that are offering it. And if you go
Mm,
to the local bookstore, Barnes and Noble or wherever, and the book isn't there, talk to the manager and say, "Hey, why don't you have this book on the shelves?" You know.
very good.
But yeah, help me spread the word. Help me
Right.
leave the Swiftboat legacy from coast to
Hmm.
coast and
Okay.
beyond.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Raul. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, Lou. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.